right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to SOFcast. This is your host, Sergeant Major Matt Parrish, and I am excited to bring another phenomenal guest to you today. A lot of times we talk to folks that are within our footprint. They're either members of one of our teams or things like that. But a lot of times we like to bring in experts from the outside who have done work with our teams in the past. And that's what we've got for you today. We've got a motivational speaker, a former undercover agent in the mob, and a former NBA referee, and really a guy who's dedicated a lot of time and effort into military stress work and helping a lot of our forces, both in special operations and across the broader Department of Defense. So Mr. Bob Delaney is with us today. Bob, thanks for joining us. How you doing out there this morning?
Thanks, Matt. Good to be with you all.
Well, I'm excited to dive into this. You know, I've heard some of your appearances on other things. I've had a lot of friends that have been to one of your presentations or heard you speak in different places. But let's start with, how you personally got involved in sort of this stress and trauma by going undercover. How did that come about? And talk to us about sort of your road into that.
Yeah, man, I grew up in a Leave It to Beaver kind of family. My dad was a state trooper. My mom worked at a cafeteria for IT&T, but she was always home by 3:00, as we came home from school. And as I grew up, I never had in my mind that I would become a state trooper. It was something that I saw that my dad did, and it kind of like took him away from the family at times. And I was like, I don't know if I had the strength or the fortitude to be able to do that job. I always saw myself as becoming a teacher or a basketball coach or something like that.
Yeah.
And probably in my junior year of college, sophomore to junior year, that summer, I started feeling like state police would be a calling. And I followed in my father's footsteps in 1973 and joined the New Jersey State Police. And that outfit is steeped in deep military tradition. It was founded by Colonel H. Norman Schwarzkopf, the father of famed General H. Norman Schwarzkopf of the Gulf Wars. And the general was around us, often representing his father. So we had interactions. I had interactions with them. And we have Schwarzkopf everything, Schwarzkopf Awards, Schwarzkopf things. That name is used a great deal. And I went through that training, 23-week resident training, similar to what the colonel brought down from West Point to the state police when he founded it. And you graduate, and it was a heck of a gig back then because we lived at the station. We were the local cops for towns that didn't have their own police department. It was a police department like a fire department. You lived it. You worked 2 days on, 2 days off. And every state police station was the same. You'd go in and it was a police station, but on the second and third floor, there were 2 troopers to every room where we lived. And downstairs was our family room, ping pong table, TV room where we hung out. And so when I graduated, I went to Flemington Station. And every 6 months early on, you're transferred to get a variety of law enforcement background work in different parts of the state. And then I went to Newton, then to Somerville. And after 2 days off, I walked back into that station, and they try to make you feel good about yourself. You got your own office. They put this little cubby hole with your name on it in the squad room with 30 other names. And I walk in, and there's a note called Lieutenant Jack Liddy, Division Headquarters, Criminal Investigation Section, Organized Crime Bureau. Man, this guy had more titles next to his name than I ever saw. And it wasn't common for a general road duty trooper to get a call from Division Headquarters. Plus, I work, I grew up Irish Catholic. That means I wake up guilty in the morning. I thought I did something. I thought I had a problem on my hands. And the other trooper said to me, relax, kid. Give the guy a call. You probably gave a ticket to a mob guy who works organized.
Yeah.
I called the lieutenant. He said to me, are you going to be in for a while? I said, yes, sir. He said, I'll meet you in the kitchen about an hour. Hour and a half later, I walk into that kitchen in Somerville Station, and there's this intimidating figure. He's in plain clothes. But Lieutenant Liddy stands about 6'4". He's got meat hooks for hands. He's the kind of guy that hangs on his lapels when he talks to you. He's also the kind of guy that the button on the shirt has never met the hole on the shirt. He's wearing a 16 when it should be a 22. And the tie is half tied and hanging down. And after a period of conversation, he said to me, are you interested in doing undercover work? And I said, yes, sir. And he turned and walked away. I said, Lieutenant, what is it? Drugs, narcotics? Because back then, all we were doing was buy bust on the street. He said, you keep asking questions, you're going to be out of run. Over the next 3 weeks, I learned that the President's Organized Crime Task Force out of Washington, the FBI, New Jersey State Police were going to join forces and start a trucking company in New Jersey. First trucking company, I became one of those undercover guys, myself, another state trooper, 3 FBI agents. We started a trucking company. We were 5 co-owners. We're being politically correct, right? Nobody's more important than anybody else. And it was mid-Atlantic air sea transportation. And Matt, the best part is, like, every federal grant was written for 6 months. Like, we were going to end organized crime in the state of New Jersey in 6 months. I guess to move on to the next thing very quickly. That's not going to happen. And we thought we had this big trucking operation. We had a 16-foot truck, a van, and a station wagon. And we're wondering why the unions aren't knocking our doors down, right? I mean, it was a learning experience that had to take place. Then we got lucky. As we all know in life, luck sometimes opens doors. And a guy by the name of Patrick John Kelly was a consigliere for the Giorgio crew of the Bruno crime family. He was jammed up. The FBI had cases on him. The state police had cases on him. He could either go to jail or come to work for us. And he chose to work for us. And he was the one that really spoiled us in a way to wise. He said to us one day, how can you all be co-owners in this trucking company? I never saw a bus going down the street with 5 bus drivers. Somebody's got to be in charge.
Yeah.
So we started a new trucking company in the shadows of the Statue of Liberty called Alamo Transportation at 231 Communipaw Avenue in Jersey City, New Jersey. I became the president of that company. Pat Kelly, the informant, became the vice president. The other trooper became my driver bodyguard. The FBI agents took on roles of truck operations, truck managers, truck sales. And we had a viable trucking company hauling for us around the United States. And we had 2 new partners, the Genovese and Bruno crime families. We're kicking back 25%, 12.5% to each. I lived that Soprano-esque type life for the 3 years of my life. And what I experienced as a result was post-traumatic stress. When I was going through it, I was hiding every emotion that was inside of me. I was good at doing undercover work. We're all good at doing something. I would wear a recording device that did over 350 recordings with on-body recordings, never mind all the recordings that we had in walls and briefcases.
Sure.
One of the things that I knew is if I got caught with that wire, I'm going to get whacked because they're not going to believe. Because when you work deep cover, there's nothing on you that says you're law enforcement. You become that new person. And we weren't trying to be cute or funny, but I became Bobby Covert. My undercover name was Robert Allen Covert. The death records and birth records are not cross-indexed in our country. You can go to the death record side, find someone who died at birth with the same first name, same ethnic sounding last name, same age group, get the birth certificate, then start whole persona. And that's what we did. Like I said, I was good at meeting with the wise guys and hanging and doing a lot. But then, like, when I got 2 miles down the road after leaving them, I have to pull over and throw my guts up. Or find the first gas station that I could find because I had diarrhea. Or I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my bed was soaking wet. Now, these are things that I said very freely to you, but it's taken years upon years to be able to process. When it was happening, I wasn't telling anybody because I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to look like I couldn't do this job. And I didn't want them interpreting that there was something like that I couldn't handle. And so I share this story to help people, especially those who serve. Those who serve see what the rest of the world does not. And you're exposed to things that other folks do not. So it's even hard for anyone else to comprehend what's taking place. What I would like to do, that story was told in a book called Over My Years Infiltrating the Month. Rather than go through those kinds of stories, I'd like to go to the end. And when, after 3 years of my life, living this other life, and being made to look as though I was thrown out of the state police, and I'm sure your outfits are very similar to the state police outfits, right? We never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And so when it looked like a letter of resignation came out on a personnel order that I was thrown out of the state police. And it's also for your audience to understand, this is 1975.
Yeah.
We don't have Google. We don't have cell phones. It's like stuff happened and you couldn't get information on it. And you believed what took place. And so troopers were coming up with stories of, I got jammed up. My old man was on the job. They're trying to protect the kid. They're going to throw him out. He should have been arrested. I mean, it's like being at your own funeral and hearing people talk about it. And it's, so all of this was like this undercurrent behind me leaving, but it was to push me away. And it coincides with that first name being the same, because if somebody saw me on the street and they said, "Hey, Bobby," if I'm with Bob guys, Bobby's still the same person.
Sure.
So let's go to the last, what happens at the end. It's decided that we're going to end the investigation. And for anyone who's ever participated in something like this, you muster up around 2 a.m, and it's uniformed troopers, state police detectives, FBI agents, plain clothes, and they start making up teams. Around 3:30 in the morning, they start hitting houses. We locked up 30 on the first raid. There were over 100 arrested in this investigation. And they started hitting houses, and they started bringing people in. We were at the West Orange Armory in West Orange, New Jersey. I was at the command post, and people were like seeing this long-haired guy that had put on 25 pounds during the time that I was undercover, and not knowing if it was me or what. I got assigned to be with Sergeant Barry Lardier. Sergeant Lardier was in plain clothes, but he had the state police ID outside of his jacket pocket. I had nothing. Nothing was given back to me. And as they started bringing the defendants in and processing them, fingerprinting, photographs, shooting them off into rooms, so he was going to be the next informant, Sergeant Laudier said to me, "You want to go downstairs and see what's going on?" Meaning where all the processing is taking place. I said yes when I meant no, because now they're going to really know who I am.
Sure.
The military bearing came back. I put myself at parade rest, shoulders up, eyes up, looking right in the eye. And I'm standing next to Sergeant Lardier. And a guy by the name of Ronnie Sardella was being fingerprinted. The trooper was putting the cuffs back on him. And Ronnie, for lack of a better term, was a friend at that time. We stole tractor trailers together. We did dope deals together. We did gun deals. He's a mob guy. He knew his wife, knew his kids, been to his house for dinner. He looked over at me. And as I'm standing there next to Sergeant Laudier in parade rest, he's thinking I'm cuffed, right? And he said, "What, they're pinching?" And before I could answer, Sergeant Laudier said, "He's not pinched. He's with us. He's a trooper." And the look that went between us was not one of anger. It was one of hurt and disappointment. He said to me, "Bobby, how could you do this to me? How could you do it to us?" Friend. Freeze frame, go back to St. Mary's Grammar School, Patterson, New Jersey. I was taught by the good sisters of St. Don. I'm in 5th grade. I get caught doing something wrong. Sister Joseph Rozier tells me I'm going to be punished. Before she tells me what the punishment is, I said, "Sister, Jimmy DeLello is doing it too." I gave up my best friend in the heart. You know the ring that it says the good sisters are married to God? That's also there to put welts on your head. She cracked it. She said, "You don't tell on your friends." It's an unwritten rule on the schoolyard. You don't tell on your friends. And yet what we ask undercover people to do is become friends with people and tell them. It took me down a road of what I referred to as emotional roller coaster, emotional violence inside of me, because I felt so hypocritical. I felt like, how can I, if somebody did to me what I just did to them, I wouldn't be a happy guy. And so it compounded about a week later. Within a week, I was called to division headquarters, met with Major Bill Baum, who's in charge of all investigations for the state of New Jersey, in charge of this investigation. Lieutenant Liddy was in the office. And they played a recording of a wiretap from a Hoboken, New Jersey social club where it was a Genovese hangout. And it was innuendo conversation of me getting whacked.
Mm-hmm.
They had intelligence information from state police detectives, FBI intelligence, that there was some type of retribution may take place. I tried to act cool and say it doesn't make for a good day, boss. And he was an empathetic leader. He had everyone leave the room. He sat with me, came from around his desk, and he said, "Bobby, I want you to think about who we're dealing with. They're not going to respond by saying, 'Hey, that Bob Delaney, what a funny guy he was. He hung out with us for 3 years. We're all going away for 8 to 20 in prison. Let's have him over for dinner.' There's going to be this anger response. It's a knee-jerk response." He said, "Quite honestly, not much different when I, meaning he, the major, would walk through a state police station after a trooper was shot or killed.
Mm-hmm.
Did he hear troopers saddling up to go out and say they're coming in on the slab and they're coming in handcuffs? It's just words. It's reaction." But he said, "Until we get this where we want it to be, you're going to have a security team on you." And I did. Troopers were living in my house. They were with me at all times. I had to go out and testify in grand juries. I had to go on surveillances. And on that security team was a detective by the name of John Schroeder. And John had a psychology background from Rutgers University. And he was the first one to recognize something inside of me, because for something I wanted to get away from so bad, 3 weeks after surfacing, I got the leather jacket back on, I got the chains going, I got the pinky ring. I'm back to being Bobby Gover, because that's my normal. That's who I wanted. Where I felt comfortable. And when we were out in surveillances and I got closer with this team, we'd stop off for a drink late at night. And if I got in that setting, I bought everybody drinks, because that's what Bobby Gover did. Schroe said to me, "What are you doing, pal? That's not Fed money anymore. That's mortgage money. You're hurting yourself." I did the moonwalk. I got away from him. He doesn't know what I'm going through. I pushed that guy away. And you know, then I got lucky again. I got paraded around. It's at the point I testified before the United States Senate, gave a briefing to Congress. I was all over telling the story because they wanted to hear about this law enforcement trucking company in law enforcement academies. And I was presenting at the Jersey City Police Academy, and in the audience happened to be Dr. Henry Campbell. And Hank was my college psychology professor at New Jersey City University. And Hank and I started doing some informal therapy. And he said, "Bobby, what you're going through is post-traumatic stress." I said, "Hank, get out of here. I'm a trooper. It's a military thing. I'm reading about guys coming home from Vietnam. They're doing studies. That's not me." And you got to remember, this is not late 70s into the early 80s. Post-traumatic stress did not become a diagnosis until 1980. Yet we have talked about this forever. After the Civil War, it was known as soldier's heart. After World War I, it was known as shell shock. After World War II, it was known as battle fatigue. After the Korean and Vietnam Wars, it was referred to as flashbacks. Now we call it post-traumatic stress disorder. And from my view, from the time we started that, we have over-medicalized this conversation, and we scare people away from having it. And please don't interpret that I mean that we don't need the medical side of the house. We do. We just have to build a stronger bridge from those who need resources to those who. So one of the things that I've done, so let me keep going. Got lucky for the third time. A guy by the name of Louis Free was a case agent on my case. He became the 15th director of the FBI. The name may resonate. Lou had a son who was in special forces, and Louis knew what I was going. And he introduced me to another undercover guy. And I know him as Joe Pistone. The world knows him as Donnie Brasco, the movie.
Yeah.
And the first time I met with Joe, looked in his eyes, read his body language, heard his words, I knew he got what I was going through. And that was my first introduction to peer-to-peer conversations. I used to refer to it as peer-to-peer therapy, but I take away every medical sounding term when having this conversation related to the statement I just made about it being over-medicalized. So that's a real short way of sharing with you and your audience, Matt, about how I got to become a student of post-trauma, how I've become immersed in this world, and for the past 40 years, I've been doing work in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously that's sort of the heyday, as you said, the Donnie Brasco, the hey, Undercover. I mean, how many movies have we had made about basically you and guys like you, putting on that identity? But I think it's, I think obviously you've seen parallels over the last 40 years, and I certainly have over my career of all of us to some extent when we are faced with an overwhelmingly stressful situation or going to combat, things like that, put on a form of an identity, right? You put on, sort of your exterior armor of what you think you need to be in that situation. And I think coming back after, for a lot of us, multiple tours and trying to take that identity off is very similar to you 3 weeks afterwards with the leather jacket on. Your brain doesn't switch as easily in between those things as we always feel like it can. So, obviously a ton of overlap between what you and other folks in law enforcement or fire or other first responder career fields sort of experience in the same way that we have. So, I appreciate you going through it, walking us through sort of your origin story of how you got involved in it, and then obviously all the work you've done since then. I'm curious, as you started to have those peer-to-peer conversations, it's something that we talk about a lot. What did you learn about the ability of being able to sort of rebuild each other through those conversations with people who have gone through it, just like you had?
Yeah, the peer-to-peer conversations are, in breaking it down, you have to have a similar experience.
Sure.
You're doing peer to peer, right? And I choose that word carefully because words matter in this conversation. Similar, it doesn't have to be the same experience, it's a similar experience.
Sure.
And the difference with family, right? So my wife Billy is all things to me, right? It's my wife, she's my lover, she's mom to the kids, she's grandmom to the grandkids, she's got so many titles. But I can't put that title of peer to peer on her. She didn't work undercover against the mob that I'm aware of. I mean, but point being is that your family is one level of support.
Yeah.
But the peer-to-peer is another level of support. And there's a differentiation between there. Yes, there are some folks that they're in the military together, husband and wife, partners. However, that may open a door to peer-to-peer taking place, but more often than not, because of the emotional tie. And just for example, so I use this example when I explain this. When I was in the NBA and not as high up the ladder, working the playoffs, the finals, and so maybe I was in the first round, working the second round, third. The cut list would come out, and I'd be upset. Man, I should be working these games. I should still be working. And my family's going to say, yeah, you should, because you're the best referee in the NBA. To their view, my friends think the same thing.
Sure.
And I was so nuts that, like, I would tell everybody, don't even watch the playoffs. I mean, we'll mess up their Nielsen rating. They don't want me. I don't want that. You get nuts in this world. You do silly, crazy things. So peer-to-peer has to be with someone who's gone through a similar experience. For me, having Joe Pistone, Donnie Brasco, having other undercovers to share that experience with was important. And that takes time away from family to be able to have those conversations. So when I speak with families, I help spouses, partners understand that when you all come back from deployment, it's important for you to be spending time with those you were on deployment with, because you went through that similar experience. Yet it can be interpreted, oh, he or she doesn't want to be with me. They want to be with someone else. And so having honest conversation and taking a holistic approach to how we speak about post-trauma is extremely important. Early on in my days in involvement with the military, they would have me speaking to 1,000 troops on post-traumatic stress disorder education and awareness was the term we got it. And it was like 1,000 troops would come into either a hangar or into a theater, and I'd give a presentation, and I would say to the bosses, number one, we got to change the title because post-traumatic stress education awareness, I could tell like just the body language. Okay, we got to go through another one of these things. We change it to operational stress.
Yeah,
and we changed the words. It was like a difference of like, yes, sir, we're operational. We can have operational stress. There was an acceptance that could have an impact. And then it was the next step of it has to become holistic. It's not only with the servicemen, it has to be with their family.
Yeah.
See, we get a heck of a deal in our country. We pay one service member salary, but we get an entire family serving and sacrificing. That has to be acknowledged. And so I was very, I wanted to make it known to the bosses, we've got to bring families together. And retreats started to happen. And we started bringing families, and I would speak only with spouses, but I also speak with the kids, not exactly about what I would speak to the adults about, but hey, to get into the conversation, right? I spend time with them. We bring NBA gear. We give them that. I go to the schools. And at some point, I'll say to them, what's it like if mom or dad are deployed? And just by their body language, I can see them. It's okay to be honest. It's okay. I mean, it's important to be honest. And I say that because I was taught to lie by my mother, right? And not intentionally. But back in the day, when the phone rang, we had no answering service. It was a big old black phone that hung on the wall that took two hands as a kid to be able to pick it up. It was so heavy. And you would answer the phone, and I would be like, "Hi, Aunt Peg, how you doing?" And my mother would be at the other side. "I'm not home. I'm not home." And I'm like, "Hey, Mom's not home. I'll have to call you later." Hang up. A day later, I lie. I get sent to my room for 2 days.
Sure.
Why are you able to lie and I'm not able to lie? And so you start to see that there's a different kind of like helping kids understand it's okay. Emotions are meant to be felt. Yet we do everything as human beings to hide our emotions. And so I would ask on Friday night for your audience to go out and take a look at a bar, and you will see drunks trying to act sober. And go home and turn on the TV, and you'll see actors and actresses trying to act drunk, and none of them fools. So being honest about emotions is extremely important. Now, I'm going to ask you and your audience to imagine I'm holding the biggest balloon you've ever seen in your life, full of air. And how do I get the air out of it? I can take a pin and pop it, but we don't have a balloon anymore. I can let it go. It flies all over the room, goes out the door. We don't know what happened to the balloon. But if we're patient, willing to listen to sounds we do not want to hear, we turn it upside down and let a little air at a time. May hurt our ears, but eventually we're going to get all the air out of our balloon. We're going to have a full balloon we can use again one day. That's us with trauma. We need to talk about and get it. But what do? More often than not, we push one down on top of another, on top of another. We can handle it. Whether it's the uniform you wear or the uniform I used to wear, we like to think of ourselves as being able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. We can handle it. And yet we have to remember there's a human being inside of that uniform. And I'm not going Dr. Phil. I'm not saying get up in front of a group and say, every time I hear a gun go off, I get palpitations. I'm not talking. When the bell rings, you're warriors. When the bell rings, you're trained to do it, you're going to do it. What I'm talking about, when there's a safe environment to allow you with someone you trust to be able to talk about your emotions by letting some of that air out of the balloon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen a lot of very successful programs, both in, the organization that I help run with Preservation of Force and Family, but a lot of exterior 501c3 non-federal entities that are, doing this on a scale of ensuring that, yeah, there are medical resources available. There's psychologists and things available at some of these retreats or some of these places that you can, go away for a weekend or a week or a month. But most often, sort of the feedback that I've seen from a lot of the successful ones is it's really the peer-to-peer conversations that are happening there where folks are able to, like you said, you just got to be somebody with a similar experience and somebody who understands it. And it's just an opportunity to kind of process it. I mean, we, operational stress, both in combat and during training and all these different things. I mean, you got to go through it and process it and figure out how do I sharpen myself and be ready for the next time, but also not walk around with this, as you said, the balloon, but just, having these things that make me less effective the next time that I'm going to go do it. And so, I know we've seen a ton of, as I said, a ton of success from times when people can get real with each other. And just realize that, hey, like we're all going through similar things. We've got to talk these things through. It doesn't make it any different or any weaker or anything else. I think we've done, we've moved the ball a long way down the field, so to speak, on the whole stigma of being able to talk about it. But there's still always going to be some stigma as a younger guy or gal who comes into this career field or into law enforcement or anything else when it's now happening to you. And until you sort of have that aha moment where you're talking with peers and like, oh, okay, yeah, other people are going through similar situations, and we're all, it's a natural bodily response to some of the things that we've gone through. I'm curious, when you came out of this, the undercover side, and you're kind of going through it, did you see going into sort of the NBA referee thing? Was that an outlet for you? Was that a new way to sort of work through some of these things in, it's a stressful job as well in a different way, but was that a way that now you could sort of walk this out as sort of your second career?
Yeah, it's a great observation, Matt. What happened was after I surfaced and all that I just explained.
Right.
I stayed in the state police for 10 more years.
Okay. Yeah.
During that time, as my security became more where I could go back to leading my own life, I started, the only thing that made sense to me, I lived on a street that had no rules and boundaries, uh, being in that mob world. The game of basketball had boundaries and rules.
Mm.
And I found I was being drawn back to the game that I played as a kid in high school and college. And that was giving me my inner peace between those lines. I was able to have a feeling in between those lines that this feels safe and it feels right. And also, I didn't know what I know about post-traumatic stress today, but it was placating to my hypervigilance.
Right.
It was allowing the endorphins to be released as I was running. And there was decisions that I had to be made. So my mind was being occupied rather than allowing the paranoia to sink in.
Yeah.
So all of those kinds of things were being taken. And then I was refereeing and I moved up the ladder. And I always thought that I would like stay as a state trooper and hopefully referee at the college level. And I couldn't get it. I wasn't accepted into the college the first year that I applied. And during the summer, there were pro leagues up in New York, the City College of New York Pro League, as well as the Rucker and a variety of others. And then there was the Jersey Shore Summer Pro League. And so I would referee there. And a guy by the name of Darrell Garrettson was the director of officials, came out of the stands after a game at Jersey Shore and asked if I was interested. This was 1985. And I went into the Continental Basketball Association, which is the forerunner to the G League of today.
Mm.
In 1987, I was hired into the National Basketball Association. And what I say to folks is when you're going through tough times, find what gives you an inner peace. So the traditional ways of therapy are not where we are in 21st century. Basketball became my therapy. Basketball gave me my life back. It allowed me to process my emotions. And so we've seen the same things. If if you know if you remember a movie called Taking Chance, it was the movie about an escort officer to try to educate folks. It was an
Mm-hmm.
HBO movie. Kevin Bacon played the lieutenant who was the escort officer. The reason it was called Taking Chance, the Marine's name who was brought home was Chance Phelps.
Right.
Father John has a ranch out in Wyoming. He allows his ranch to be used for hunting expeditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's wounded warriors, soldiers, cops. They go out hunting. It's not about the hunting. It's about the 2 or 3 days being a unit. And then it's around that campfire at night that allows the environment for peer-to-peer. So creating environments that allow peer-to-peer to take place is another element of figuring out how do we process this.
Yeah.
The old days of sitting on a couch talking to the psychologist, that's not the approach. You are active, folks. You have to keep you active. You're used to being around in units. You have to keep you around in units. These are all things that are designed to allow that. So vets on deck, sailing, a ride to recovery, bicycle riding, doing activities together.
Yeah.
My wife and I took part in the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. We rode bicycles from Ground Zero to Shanksville to the Pentagon, all sites. General Casey took the ride with us back in the day. Wounded warriors, 250 wounded warriors, active duty, their family members, cops, and it was a police escorted group all through. But every night we would stop somewhere, and after riding X amount of miles, it was 8 days of riding, and we'd have dinner as a group, a buffet, and then we'd have presentations. The first night I did the presentation on my story and post-traumatic stress. Then we had open mic. And Victor was a soldier who had been hit in Iraq at an IED blast that blinded him. He rode all 8 days with us on a tandem on the back end of his buddy bike. And he got up and spoke. This is where your stories are powerful. At times, I think we make up some pretty corny stuff of videos and about post-traumatic stress and suicide when the real powerful, rich stories are the troops. And I understand getting you all to tell your stories is difficult at times because you don't want the spotlight on you. But when he got up to speak, he said, this is not what I signed up for, man. And when I came home, I gave serious thought to suicide. And he said, I even acted out on it, but I wasn't successful. And I'm glad because today when my kids run their hands over my face, I'm glad I stayed. And it was such a powerful moment of understanding. And so it drove me to start telling other stories. And that was my second book, Surviving the Shadow, The Journey of Hope into Post-Traumatic Stress. And the reason I called it Surviving the Shadows, I believe we all have shadows. But I underline to folks, never be afraid of a shadow. Because in order for a shadow to exist, that means there has to be light nearby. And so it's our responsibility to each other and to ourselves to get to that light. And that is what happens when we create these kinds of environments where peer-to-peer can take place. We're finding the light. We're finding ways to be able to process. Matt, it took me a long time to figure this out. Courage is not absent of fear. Courage takes place despite the fear that you feel. That's not only running up a hill with bullets coming. That's also about moral courage. That's also about the courage to be able to have conversation about some of the true feelings that you're feeling inside of you. And when you have those conversations, you're letting air out of the balloon. But you're also, when I have peer conversation with you, I give you permission to tell me your story. And when you tell me your story and I tell you mine, we validate each other's feelings. What is personal is universal. If you're feeling something, there's an element of that being felt by someone else in this world. There are no new emotions in this world. It's only how we navigate.
Yeah, I think something you brought up that I think I've seen ring true across my life and across my career. A lot of times we have these conversations. It's like people are looking for like one silver bullet, like, hey, this is how it's going to fix it. I think there's a web of a lot of different things that, to use your analogy, let a little bit of air out of that balloon. I think peer-to-peer opportunities, I've seen a ton of great organizations devoted to it around the outdoors, whether it's hunting, fishing, camping. But also I think there's the ability or the need to have an outlet sort of solo as well, whether that is, woodworking, archery, golf, something that is technical, something that you need to be able to have focus, and that focus creates an opportunity to focus creates purpose, right? And that purpose and that discipline, creates structure, creates freedom in that you are doing something with your hands, doing something with your mind, and it can help you. It's a yoga type of a thing, even though it's not necessarily doing yoga as we technically think about it. But I know that I have a ton of friends that have been successful in finding something they can do. The barrier of entry to it's low. It's not something that I can only do on a retreat somewhere with a whole group of people. There's a space for that where that helps, but there's also a space for what can I do. It may not be daily, but at least multiple times a week where I can get into something where I'm, for most of us at least, using my hands and in some way, engaging to where you get into just kind of a zone where now the task quiets the other things outside. So I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting finding for you that same sort of purpose and solace in refereeing. Is I wouldn't necessarily immediately think of that, but then when you think through, the physical act of running back and forth, having to make decisions, having to have that focus, there's no time to think of other things when somebody's driving the lane and you got to see whether they get fouled or whether they travel. And so once you kind of talk through, it's like, that makes perfect sense. And there's a ton of those things that, you may not initially, it may not be something that you think of like, oh, I'm going to do this to work through operational stress. Like, no, it's just something that I enjoy, but then you realize some of the elements of it really weave together the ability for your mind to focus on something else. I'm curious, How did you find taking, at that point you'd done another 10 years, you'd really been looking at a lot of this mental toughness, operational stress, things like that. And then you work your way up into the NBA where there's a ton of operational stress, obviously on the players, but also as for you as a ref,
Right.
you got the best people in the world. You know that if you make, a bad call, you're going to hear about it from the people in the stands. You're going to hear about it from Kobe Bryant or whoever's jaw jacking, but you're also going to hear about it in the media. Nobody wants to be on SportsCenter as the guy who made the terrible call. How did you look at sort of the evolution of your thought of operational stress when it was now in that arena of NBA refereeing?
Yeah, it's a great point because you don't think of it at the time, but then when you look back, you see how it all helps. But also, yeah, it's a very you live in a fishbowl when you referee. The whole world is watching you, and it's interesting because I've made many a bad call. I've watched my own video, so it's not like there's no. When I became the vice president of referee operations for the NBA, after a 25-year career as a referee, I went over to the management side, and for 5 years I was in the management side. I would say to referees, there's no expectation of perfection. We're pursuing excellence. And but the world has an expectation of perfection, especially since we've had replay and all those kinds of things. But when you make those bad calls, and I'll just tell you a quick story. I had a call back before replay that was the New York Knicks playing the Miami Heat. I wipe out a basket by Allen Houston at the buzzer. I say it wasn't. It was good. It should have been. And it changed in April. It changed where the playoffs the positioning was. So the Knicks were away versus being home because of that loss. And so their first game was in Indiana in the first round of the playoffs. And I happened to have that game. And now I walk out onto the floor. And, Knicks fans do travel, and you start hearing some rumblings. So there's one Knicks fan who travels, and I'm going blank on his name now. I'm trying to search for his name. Famous
Spike Lee?
Spike Lee.
Yeah.
So Spike is on the court. Thanks, man. Spike is on the court. He sits courtside.
Yeah.
Yelling at me. And he said, because of you, we're on the road. We should be home. Hey, Spike, I've seen every one of your movies, and they're not all hits either. Mistakes happen, man. I mean, it's just, and that's part of the life in the NBA. Yeah. Being able to respond to those and not making one call become 2 or 3 bad calls is important. So resilience levels are extremely important. And resiliency is an interesting conversation that I would have with referees. I have it with law enforcement, I have it with military, and I break it down to 3 levels. But also, to your point, resilience is individual, but also it is team.
Sure.
There's a resiliency you get from being part of special forces because you have other folks that when you're having a bad day, they can pick you up.
Yeah.
But yet there's a resiliency that has to be internal to you. And when I ask folks what resiliency means, just common terminology of bounce back. But if we're bouncing back to where we were and we're not in a good spot to begin with, that's not progress. Right. That's maintaining. So I break it down into 3 buckets. And I say there has to be a confrontation to the reality. But I refer to confrontation as carefrontation. Confrontation sounds kind of negative. Carefrontation means we're confronting this because we care. And that has to take place. Then there's a search for meaning. There's a spirituality, I believe, to resilience. We all have our own religious beliefs, but there is a spirituality. And then the last is FIA, flexible, innovative, and adapt. And think of all those 3 things that I just spoke about. You all do that on a daily basis, operation. You not afraid to confront anything. You know what your mission is. And you always have plan A, B, C, D, and E because you're flexible, innovative, and adapt. And if we do the same thing on the operational stress side, we're going to find that is going to give us release and relief. Tim Karcher, you may know, Lieutenant Colonel, gets hit in Iraq, leading his troops gets hit by an RPG. They can't get him in the air back to the field hospital. They have to fight their way back, and they do. They get him down to Baghdad over the launch stool. I get to spend time with a BAMC, Brooks Medical, and at a post-traumatic stress program. And Timmy he said to me, you know what what post-traumatic stress is like? It's like diet. It's like some of us need to lose 5 to 10, some 10 to 20. Some of us are morbidly obese, and then it changes on an hourly, daily basis. And I said, Tim, what a great way to give a quantitative measure to something you can't measure. You can't measure post-traumatic stress, how much one person has over another. I said, but I'm going to use that in my presentations because I've been 5 to 10 pounds overweight since I came out of the womb. And I've been 10 to 20, and I've been obese. But that didn't mean I stopped living. It just meant at times I bought bigger pants. So this is not about eliminating post-traumatic stress. It's about keeping post-traumatic stress at post-traumatic stress, about putting roadblocks up so it doesn't lead into post-traumatic stress disorder, into mental illness, leading to suicide. So understanding the stages that take place. And also, in my book, Surviving the Shadows, I allowed my doctor to talk about my medical records. And I'll just say it very simply. Dr. Guy De Silva was brilliant in his explanation to me. He said, like exposure to the sun can show up with a cancer 30 years later. Exposures to prolonged periods of stress can show up with medical problems down the road because of hormonal imbalances, because of adrenal fatigue. Sure. So if we have come from this as understanding emotional and psychological sides to post-traumatic stress. But we have to understand there's a physiology. So you can do all the emotional and psychological kind of therapeutic work, but if the body is imbalanced, there's still going to be this tip. So understanding we have to take care of ourselves, not only emotionally, physically. So I refer to as mind health. The reason I say mind health, I think mental health creates a mental illness image subliminally. So we want to use words. We're used to becoming strong. Get these guns going because you work. You have to do the same thing with our mind health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the important things, for our preservation of the force and family program that we've had for, about 10 years, and we've really been leaning into sort of brain health and cognitive performance over the last couple of years. One of the most important things I think when we talk about PTS, at least in my experience and that of my peer group that I've talked to quite a bit, I think there was a connotation early on with PTS, at least, for the post-GWAT, post-Global War on Terrorism generation, is like a single source event leading to like, oh man, I'm having these recurring nightmares and all those things. And exactly what you talked about with the physiological impact, it's not necessarily a single source event that we're seeing some of what we're now, we're not saying, or we're not calling it operator syndrome, but that is sort of the moniker that's been put on this culmination of symptoms, hormonal imbalance, other things that seem to, there was an importance of naming it something different, or at least trying to capture this symptomology differently, because it didn't ring true to me and other guys like me to say PTS, because PTS was like a single source, blown up, buddy of mine dies in my arms, that type of thing. And it was more of a cumulative stress that over years and years and years has affected the way your hormones react, the way you react to problems, all these different things. But some of the same outlets, there's definitely a Venn diagram that corresponds between the two of them, right? And so I think you're spot on with what we've seen over our 10 years of working this, but really in the last 2 of these brain health things, the mental health side of it plus the physical health side of it both have to be addressed. And if you only lean towards one or the other, you're going to have an incomplete picture, and you're probably going to have an incomplete recovery and resilience as you continue to move forward towards it. So I definitely think it's an important conversation to have, and it's important for all of us to realize that it's not just there's not a silver bullet to it, but there's also a lot of times not just one single impact that, if we just work through this one memory, were great, right? That was sort of that's at least what I remember a lot from when I was younger. And we started going to war. It was like, oh, you just got to work through this one thing that's keeping you up at night. And it's like, well, nothing's keeping me up at night, so I don't know what you're talking about, because I don't have the single source thing that's eating away at me. But I do have all of these issues that are suddenly manifesting, 10 years later after 10 years of cumulative stress. And so I definitely think it's something that we are getting better about discussing more holistically. But it's something that that's why, conversations like this are important. I'm curious, as you look at.
Yeah, can I just jump in on that right there? So I use terminology, not all wounds bleed, and invisible wounds may cut as deep and hurt as much as the wounds we do see. And to what you just said, it triggered in my mind that with physical wounds, at times we will see a scab that will come over the top of that physical wound. But if we hit it against a wall or something, it breaks it off and it starts to bleed again. The same thing happens with invisible wounds. We develop scabs over the top, but yet when something that took place in another part of our life is triggered by a smell, a sound, a date on a calendar, it brings us back to that original trauma. And so understanding how all what you just said is important for us to be able to address and see it holistically versus thinking of it as one event. We wanted to blame 9/11. We want to blame it because it's plausible to our minds, right? We can function with that. But we start thinking it's an overwhelming, right? It starts to pull us. I don't have a glass of water here, but many times when I'm presenting, I ask people, I'm holding a glass of water, how much does it weigh? 4 to 8 ounces. It's easy to carry, right? It's no big deal. But if I stand here for 30 days and you come back, I'm going to be a pain in the neck to be around, because even though it's not much to carry, it's going to start pulling on my shoulder. It's going to weigh me down. And it's not until I learn how to put it down and walk away from it or ask someone else to help me carry it, can I interact with it. And so understanding and how this all takes place is important. We've also kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have experienced post-traumatic stress, that you should be acting in this way. It's kind of comical to me that you all know the answers to the test, right? So once I was immersed into your world, I knew about that survey or that questionnaire that when you're coming back from deployment, like everybody knows what the answers are. Sure. You better not answer that you're having flashbacks, or you better not answer that you're saying that you're having difficulty sleeping, because you're going to make a left when everybody else make a right coming off that bird, and you're not going to go home. So I would say that from privates to generals, everybody be shaking their head in the audience. And my point being is we've got to be more honest and realistic about this conversation. Sure. We can't just use CYA stuff in order to check a box. It's got to be an honest conversation.
Yeah, one of the things that we strive for most of all is a change in culture towards proactively talking about these things, but really changing a culture where all of our helping agencies and all of our people that we have from POTIF or from anywhere that's sort of assisting our folks, for the first 10 years or so, it was very much, you felt like people were looking for a window in to see something that was going to get you pulled off of a team. And we're trying to create more of a similar atmosphere to, the Olympic team or Division I college sports or professional sports, where all of my helping agencies are trying to find out how they can best get me to perform at my best on Sunday or on Saturday or whatever it is on the field for that game, as opposed to, I always say, if a kid gets recruited to Alabama or Georgia or Clemson or wherever, he's not worried about like, oh, if they see, if my physical therapist sees that I need a little extra work on my calf, oh man, they're going to kick me off the team, as much as he's like, okay, I know that they're trying to help me work this out so that, because they need me, they want me to perform as best I can on Saturday, for the big game. And that's what we're really trying to get sort of the culture of our helping agencies to look at the same way, is that we're not going to counter this through a check the block where if I answer truthfully, I get pulled off a team. Because as I've told everyone up to our 4-star. Like, I will lie to you. I'll lie to the 4-star.
Right.
I'll lie to my mom. I'll lie to whoever it is if it keeps me on a team. Like, that's,
Put me in, coach.
yeah,
Put me in,
that's
coach.
what we're here to do. And that's what you need, team guys and gals. That's what we need the mindset to be. We need people leaning forward, ready to go, and wanting to go be on that field, and for us on that battlefield. So it's not something that we should be surprised by, that people don't want to answer those things truthfully. But I think the most important thing from this conversation that we've had so far is really just the reinforcement of finding an outlet for yourself, but also finding ways to talk to others that have similar experiences, and it'll help you get that air out of the balloon. As we wrap up, I want to turn it over to you, Bob, as sort of any last words that you want to leave the audience with as we wrap it up.
Yeah, my most recent book just launched September 27th, and it's called Heroes Are Human, Lessons in Resilience, Courage, and Wisdom from the COVID Front Lines. And what I came to understand is that I would ride by hospitals during the COVID pandemic, and I would see heroes work here. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, because anyone that's ever been called a hero that I've been around doesn't want that title. And whether it's the troops that I've been around, everybody deflects that. And also, they don't feel heroic at times. And I'm thinking, the amount of death that's taking place, they're not going to feel heroic about that. So I started delving into and interviewing and spending time. And I drew parallels between the work that I've done with the military, law enforcement, firefighters, first responders, to what is going on with our healthcare community. And my thirst for knowledge came later in life. I went to college for one reason, play basketball. And when I realized the NBA wasn't going to be called, that's when I went to the state police. And my thirst for knowledge came later. I got my master's in leadership from St. Mary's College in California. And then I was a student at the Harvard Global Mental Health Trauma Recovery Program, and now present for that program today. And I've developed a self-care kind of video to speak to, 21-minute video to speak to these conversations, because post-traumatic stress disorder is one element, but PTSD can also mean post-traumatic stress development. It could also mean, and the reason I put wisdom and courage, resilience into the subtitle of this new book, is that I believe there's a lot of courage and wisdom that is gleaned from going through post-traumatic events, if we are willing to dig into it and learn from it. If we've got a minute, I'd just like to share with you the first time that I went to Iraq, the first time I was going to be embedded with the 25th Infantry Division up in Mosul. I got to spend time with troops, and the first night that I was there, it took so long to get there, and we had to go through Kuwait and Azerbaijan, and we get there. And I was with Tim Dwight. Timmy was a football player from the NFL, All-American at Iowa. And we got assigned to chew. Got a briefing from General Bob Brown, who was a 1-star at the time. And we got a chew. I didn't know what a chew was. I mean, I get into it, and you got the T-walls going, and you got all this thing. We finally fall asleep around 2 a.m. because he and I spoke about the teamwork that we saw over the last few days of just getting us there, and then going to be there for a couple of weeks with the troops. We were just so excited, and he and I talked about how amazing the men and women are that serve us. We finally fall asleep around 5 a.m. There was an explosion.
Yeah.
Timmy was in the NFL, ran touchdowns back in Super Bowls. I beat him to the door. I didn't know where I was going, but I threw that door open. And there were troops standing outside, and they just smiled at us and said, "Sir, it was close, but it was not that close." Mm-hmm. You know where danger is by sound. And I had a conversation with the soldier. And I heard the most powerful words I've ever heard in my life. One soldier said to me, "Sir, we do our best soldiering, and we're not afraid of dying. We do our best soldiering, and we're not afraid of dying." And it underlined to me the commitment you have to each other, the commitment you have to our country, the commitment you have to me and my family, and that moves me on the mission I am on, to help you all move the bar, to understand that self-care is not selfish. Take care of yourself. So my hope for all of you is that you stay healthy, stay safe, take care of one another. and take care of you too.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it, Bob. Thank you. And we really appreciate you coming on SOFcast and sharing that with us. And to all of you out there listening, we really appreciate you listening to another episode of SOFcast. We hope that you're already following USSOCOM on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. But if you're not, go check it out. And wherever you're listening to this or watching on YouTube, go down and either subscribe or give us a 5-star review, because it does help other people find it. And again, if you have feedback, if there's someone you want to hear from, if there's a topic you want to hear about, feel free to send us an email, sofcast@socom.mil. And we appreciate all the feedback that we've had. And we've taken a lot of it, and it's drawn either guests or different topics that we've had here in season 4. So for all of you out there, on behalf of all of us here at USSOCOM, thanks for listening to another episode of SOFcast.